Hey everyone, William Roberts here with jamplay.com. I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of my new live course. So this is called Chord Progression of the Week. If you checked out the promo or saw any of the information about it, I'll just kind of recap what we're going to be doing. So in the beginning of this lesson, I'm basically going to walk you through a chord progression. It's going to be, all centered around a specific key, and in each progression that we talk about in each week, it'll have, a variety of concepts in it. But I will choose to kind of focus on a concept in each week that I think the chord progression kind of brings out. So for instance, this week we're going to be talking about the number system. It's basically how we can play a chord progression or talk about chord progressions within a key and how we can actually assign chords different intervals within a key. So I'll kind of get into that the more we get into this lesson. But basically, that'll be kind of the first lesson, and as we go on, each week we're kind of just going to expand upon all of this new information and all the stuff that we talk about in previous lessons. And then additionally, so, kind of the first half, I'm basically going to be breaking down the number system, breaking down all the voicings that I'm using for this first progression, and then I'm going to show you this little lead kind of melody line, maybe halfway between a solo and a lead line is kind of or a melody, I guess, is kind of how I pictured this. And I'll break down what scales I'm using, what arpeggios I'm using, how I'm thinking about it. And, in talking about the chords, we're also going to be talking about, how can I create a melody over this? Because to me, a lot of times we think, okay, I'm a rhythm guitar player or I'm a lead guitar player, but I think really, really great guitar playing comes from, appreciating how the two kind of intertwine. So, when I'm playing really, really good, or what I think is really good rhythm playing, or when I'm, using voicings that I think are great, there's usually a kind of an implied melody that happens there. And the same thing when I'm playing a melody. When I'm doing any sort of solo, any sort of lead thing, I generally think that when I'm playing a line that's really, really outlining the chords well, that's, a melody that's going to be impactful because, the listener can really relate to it and hear where it's going. And, speed, tapping, all of sweep picking, all of this fun stuff, that's awesome, and it definitely has its place in lead playing. But, when we learn to outline the chord changes and really play something simple that can just reflect what we're hearing, that's personally what I find most impactful. So I just like to get started. I'm just going to kind of go ahead and show you this progression, and then we'll talk about how to play it. Cool. So that is the full progression that we're going to talk about for week one. So first, I just want to kind of break down each one of the voicings I'm using, show you how you can play them on your guitar. And then I'm going to talk about how this relates to our number system, how we can find all of the chords that are within a key, and then how I can basically think about this, in terms of intervals. So if somebody said, that's an awesome chord progression, but actually, if we could take it down, a whole step because, if I'm singing a melody over this, it just works better for my voice, I'll know how to do that. So let me just kind of first break down each one of these chords that I'm using. So I'm starting off with this, and I'll talk about my kind of technique too. So I'm choosing to finger pick this. I think it kind of gets into that almost like John Mayer territory. You can be a little bit more percussive with your hands. So that's something I sometimes like to do with my rhythm playing. So I'm starting off with this chord right here. So this is a G major 7, and also just for reference, before I get into that, we're going to be in the key of D major. So this is my first chord. It's a G major 7. So to play this guy, I have my first finger here on the 10th fret of the A string. Then I have my third finger here, my ring finger, on the 12th fret of the D string. I use my middle finger to play the 11th fret of the G. And then finally, I have my pinky here on the 12th fret of the B string. And you could hear too, I was doing some embellishments too, so I was doing this little slide up, so that's all still within the key of D major. I'm basically just playing up kind of a D major scale there. Like I said, I kind of like to intertwine a melody sometimes when I'm playing chords. So this is my first shape, and you'll notice too, I'm not really doing any barring when I'm doing the chord progression. When I'm doing the shape in this position, I can do some barring here if I want to, but not necessary for the way that I'm playing it. So I'm playing my G major 7 here, and just to go through those intervals, so I have a 1 here, I have a 5 here, I have a major 7 here, and I have my major 3rd here. If you don't know really what that means yet, we're going to be talking about that more and more. I just want to give you all the information now, and we're kind of going to, digest it more and more in this course. So I have this G major 7 chord. Now I'm going to this chord. So you can see I chose this voicing because it really, really leads nicely. I can hear there's kind of a melody that's almost implied in that. So this is an F sharp minor 7 chord. So major 7 to a minor 7. To play this guy, I'm basically just using my first finger to bar across the 9th fret on the A string, the D string, the G string, the B string, and the E string. So that's kind of fundamentally where it lies. And then what I'm actually doing is I'm taking my ring finger, putting it on the 11th fret of the D string. Here on the G string, it's actually just going to be from the bar, so it'll be the 9th fret, but it'll, be achieved by barring my first finger. And then right here, my middle finger is going to be on the 10th fret of the B string. And then on the high E string, you'll also hear that I have still the 9th fret ringing out. So I'm going from... And like I said, you can put that in if you want. Sometimes I was playing it, sometimes I wasn't. And then my next chord is going to be this guy right here, so an E minor 7. So you can see, because we're guitar players and our instrument does have some advantages, we do get to basically just shift this position down. So we have... And then I was doing a little hammer on with my pinky too, just to kind of add to that top voicing. And then breaking it down here. So just to walk through, so same exact voicing. You can see I don't really have to shift a lot, but I'm just barring across with my first finger on the 7th fret on the A, D, G, B, and E string. And then using my ring finger here on the 9th fret of the D, getting the 7th fret with the bar on the G, playing the 8th fret here with a middle finger on the B string, and then high E string also has a 7th. So far we have... And if you've never played any of these voicings yet, I'd really encourage you, don't feel like you have to push yourself to get up to the speed of the backing track just yet. Really see if you can focus and learn each one of the individual voicings, and, then maybe you can start applying some of the hand rhythms that I'm doing or some of the top level melodies. But really, it's just important that we see if we can get all of these voices kind of working out. And I'll talk a little bit about, my methods and how I think about, okay, this is a really cool chord progression. I can't really fully play it up to speed, so what am I going to do there? So I'll kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. But just to continue on the progression, so I have a G major 7, an F sharp minor 7, and an E minor 7, okay? Now I'm going to this chord. So this is a B minor 7. And you'll see it's actually kind of pretty straightforward, so I can play this two ways. I choose to do it this way. If you're just getting into some of these kind of extended voicings, this might be a little tricky for you. So I would encourage you, if you're kind of starting out, try it this way. So basically what I'm doing is I'm playing the 7th fret on the E string, the D string, the G string, the B string, and the E string again. So using my 3rd finger here to play all these guys, and then just using my middle finger here to play the 7th fret on the E string. And you'll notice too, so I'm skipping the A string. So this note isn't really in the chord. I could technically use it, if I wanted to do a different voicing. But you can hear when I play it in there, it just gets a little muddy for my taste. So generally it's something we skip, and you'll notice when you do this voicing too, naturally this finger is actually going to mute that A string. So even if I wanted to do something a little more aggressive, I actually really don't have to worry about this guy. So that's why I kind of recommend this voicing if you're starting out, because for this one, you notice I have to be really specific about my fingers. So I'm using my thumb to pluck the E string, and then the D string is with my first finger, my middle finger's on the G, and then my ring and sometimes my pinky's on the E. So like I said, I would maybe start off with this voicing if you're new to that. So we have this B minor 7, and then we're gonna go. So this little movement here, I'm going to be doing a C sharp half diminished. So again, if that sounds foreign to you, I'm gonna be talking about that, so don't worry. So I have my middle finger here on the 9th fret of the low E string. I have my ring finger here on the 9th fret of the D string, so I'm skipping the A again. I have my pinky here on the 9th fret of the G, and then my first finger is going to be playing right up here on the 8th fret of the B. So it's kind of a weird, awkward position. If you are having trouble with it too, you can also maybe even do just a little minimal voicing here. So it can be kind of hard and cramping for your hand to do this guy right away. So if you want, basically I'm kind of doing a minor 7 voicing like I was doing here. I'm just not playing the B string, but this is the full voicing. So I have this guy, and then I'm going to this. So this was my C sharp half diminished to this guy right here. So this is an F sharp dominant 7. And something important to note that I'm going to be talking about is initially I did it as a minor 7. Now I'm doing that same exact voicing as a dominant 7, which is a little strange when I talk more about the number system, but we'll get back to that. So I'm just doing this little guy. So I have my middle finger here on the 9th fret of the A string, first finger here on the 8th fret of the D, and then this guy right here on the 9th fret of the G string. So I have and then I'm going back to my B minor 7 here. So that's pretty much the whole entire thing. I just have this one last chord here. So you also notice this is kind of an interesting voicing that I'm doing. It's not really a major chord or a minor chord. It's actually more a sus chord. So when I say sus chord, that basically means I don't want to play a major chord. I don't want to play a minor chord. I actually want to skip the major third, which is the interval that'll tell me if I'm playing a major chord or a minor chord. And in doing that, I kind of get this really cool and nice ambiguity. So I'll talk more about why I was using this voicing as well once I talk about the number system here in a second. But I'm actually going to call this guy a G over A. So if you look, I'm basically doing this G triad, which a lot of us are probably familiar with, where I'm doing middle finger, 5th fret of the D string, or sorry, ring finger, 5th fret of the D string, middle finger, 4th fret of the G, and then first finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. But if you notice, when I'm kind of just doing this normal voicing, it'd be kind of awkward to scooch my pinky over here. So I'm just going to kind of flip my ring finger and my pinky here. So my ring finger is on the 5th fret of the E string. My pinky here is on the 5th fret of the D string, 4th fret of the G, 3rd fret of the B. So you'll notice in a lot of these voicings, when I was playing on the E string, I was actually skipping the A string. And so like I said, when I'm doing this voicing for the B, it just gets muddy. And there's a lot of contexts where, you know, when I'm doing the E string and the A string together, it'll sound really, really muddy and harsh. And, you know, that works kind of well in some genres. You know, if I was playing more of a metal song or rock song, you know, we know that power chords are a really, really important part of that. But a lot of times, you know, when I'm incorporating a 3rd, a 4th, or a 5th on the E string and the A string, it can just kind of muddy things up. So for this style, I'm actually choosing to space that out and kind of skip a lot of the stuff that's on the A string. Okay, so just to walk through each one of those chords, I have my G major 7, my F sharp minor 7, to my E minor 7, then I'm going to my B minor 7, I'll play it this way, C sharp half diminished, F sharp 7, back down to B minor 7, and then I'm playing G over A. Okay, so now that we've actually talked about the chord progression, I've broken it down for you, given you all the individual voicings, I'd like to talk about the number system. So, if you've never heard of the number system before, it centers around this. So every time we play a chord progression, we're in a key. Even if we're, playing a jazz song or, a prog rock song or something really modern that shifts keys a lot, there's still, for the most part, always going to be, a tonal center at some point. And so basically what this is saying is, okay, if I'm in the key of D major, my notes are going to be D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D, all over the fretboard. And knowing that, I can actually say I have a formula that says if you know the major scale and you can write it out, I know all of the chords that will be in that key. So what I mean by that is if I think about each one of these notes as a root note of a chord, so the first note that a chord will be based off of, I can write out the entire key. So what I mean by that is I have this little formula. So it basically says my one chord, so chord that it's going to be based off of this note, my root note of my key, my one, is going to be a major chord. And first I'm just going to talk about triads, so 3-note chords. I'll talk about more extended voicings and how I got these in a second. But first I just want to break it down and be real simple. So I'm just going to do a D major here. So my one chord in a major key, based off of the first note of the major scale, is always going to be a major chord. All right, now I'm on my 2, so I'm on the second note of my key. So if I was playing a major scale in any key, doesn't matter, I happen to be in the key of D, it's going to be a minor chord. So my 1 will be major, my 2 will be minor. So far I have. All right, now for my 3, so now the F sharp is also going to be minor. So I'll just use that same exact voicing that I did here. Okay, so far, my 1 will always be major, my 2 will always be minor, my 3 will, well, I shouldn't say always, but within the context of the number system right now, we're going to say my 1 is major, my 2 is minor, my 3 is minor, and then my 4 is going to be major. And I'll actually just play this guy up here. And I'm choosing to use all bar chords too, so we can kind of see how things shift up and down. I couldn't do all this with first position chords, of course, but I want to show it with bar chords so we can kind of see how it really does have kind of a formulaic approach to it. So, my 1 chord is major, my 2 chord is minor, my 3 chord is minor, my 4 chord is major, okay? My 5 chord is also major, okay? My 6 chord, so now I'm up here, so dun, 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 is going to be minor, okay? So 1 chord major, 2 chord minor, 3 chord minor, 4 chord major, 5 chord major, 6 chord minor. My 7th chord is going to be diminished. And here I'm actually doing a half diminished chord, so I'm going to talk about that in a second. But this will be diminished, so you'll notice everything was either major or minor. But the 7th chord is kind of the unique one where it's going to be diminished. So it really has that sound of, I don't want to stay here. When I'm playing a song, this is a chord that says, we need to move quickly because this is not a resolved area. So, just to walk through this one more time. Key of D, actually I'll just kind of talk about it abstractly first. So, my 1 chord is going to be major. My 2 chord is always going to be minor. My 3 chord is minor. My 4 chord is major. My 5 chord is major. My 6 chord is minor. My 7th chord is diminished. And then I'm back up here to my root chord again, which is going to be major. So a reason this is really useful, like I said, is if I break down a song and I'm like, okay, before I was just remembering a sequence of chords, now if I'm actually learning songs within this context, I can think, oh, okay, I'm not just playing, you know, a blues progression where I'm playing an E chord and then an A chord and then a B chord. I'm playing a 1-4-5 progression. That's what blues progressions are. It's based around a 1, 4, and a 5. And that's why maybe a lot of you who play blues might know that once you learn that first key, and then you can kind of learn, oh, okay, I kind of see how this works in a bunch of different keys. You know, once I know, if I had to, you know, we kind of learn those relationships on the fretboard. And that's the same exact thing here. We're just kind of taking it to a different level. So your number system is really, really useful because instead of just having to memorize a sequence of chords, if I go to a D major, then it's an F sharp minor, and then an E minor, you're actually thinking, no, I'm playing 1, 3, 2. And in that context, I can memorize progressions a lot easier. And like I said, I can put them in different keys. So this is a really, really valuable tool if you want to perform live, if you want to play with a variety of singers, because, you know, a lot of the music we love and know is going to be really, really difficult for most singers. So it's a really, really great tool for that. And if you're a songwriter, just being able to kind of know all of these different numbers is, you know, extremely useful because it's no longer, okay, I kind of just have to, you know, go against the drawing board here and see what chords are going to work with each other. Now it's like, okay, I have a system. I know, and, you know, I don't have to necessarily stick to it strictly, but in having the system, I can actually go, okay, I know how to generally sort my way through all of these different chords. I know how to say, I want to write a song in the key of D major. Here are my options. So after having said that, we are basically talking about triads, so 3-note chords. So now I'm going to take it up a level. So this is our first level formula, right? It says my 1 chord's major, my 2 chord's minor, my 3 chord's minor, my 4 chord's major, my 5 chord's major, my 6th chord is minor, my 7th chord is diminished, and then I'm back at my root major chord again. So now I'm going to add a 7th. So basically that just means I'm going to add an extra note. So where we were talking about 3-note chords, we're now going to be talking about a formula for 4-note chords in a key. So all of these will still have that fundamental triad. We're just going to be skipping another note in our scale so that we can kind of create a more full voicing. And this is going to get more into the voicings that I was choosing to use for this song. So we have key D major. So it's going to be a major chord. It's also going to be a major 7th chord. So really, really similar to this voicing I was doing up here. So my 1 chord is always going to be a D major 7. My 2 chord, it was a minor chord, right? It's going to be a minor 7. So my 1 chord is a major 7, my 2 chord is a minor 7. My 3 chord is also going to be a minor 7th chord. My 4 chord is going to be a major 7th chord. And now you can kind of see how these voicings are coming together, right? These were all the voicings that I was choosing to use in the song. So my 4 chord is a major 7. Here's where it gets a little interesting. My 5 chord is going to be a dominant 7. So you'll notice before when I was saying this is my 4 chord and this is my 5 chord, I could use the same exact voicing because I was just talking about 3 notes. When we're talking about 4 notes, we're adding a little bit more to those chords, so there's going to be some differences. So in the 3-note version, 4 and 5 could look the same. Now 4 and 5 are going to look different. They're going to have different 4-note voicings to them. So this is a dominant 7, and you can kind of hear the difference in it. So I'll play this for a major 7. So basically the intervals in a major 7th chord would be the root, the major 3rd, the 5th, and a major 7. And then the only difference that's going to happen here, because remember our triads are the same, is that 7 is going to be a flat 7. So instead of, we're going to get, okay? So 1 chord major 7, 2 chord minor 7, 3 chord minor 7, 4 chord major 7, 5 chord dominant 7. My 6th chord is going to be a minor 7. And then my 7th chord is going to be that half diminished chord. So half diminished, what that basically means is if I have a diminished triad, I'm going to say that's going to be a 1, a flat 3, and a flat 5. So So those are the intervals that are going to be in my chord. And then if I want to make it a half diminished, it means I have a minor 7 in it. So it's 1, flat 3, flat 5, minor 7. And if this kind of feels like a lot of information coming all in at once, just pick up what you can. Like I said, we're going to be talking about this each and every week. So we'll go more and more into this. It's not like, after I said this, you have to memorize this. It's just information that I think is really, really helpful. And when I'm learning music theory, even though some people think it is really like a textbook where you learn chapter 1 and then chapter 2 and chapter 3, while that might apply sometimes, I also think it's kind of learning by osmosis. So it's really something that the more and more you hear something, the more and more you're comfortable with it, even if you might not fully understand it, the more it gradually and slowly kind of makes its way into your understanding of how you're playing your guitar. So, just to go through that one more time, 1 chord is major 7, 2 chord is minor 7, 3 chord is minor 7, 4 chord is major 7, 5 chord is dominant 7, my 6th chord is minor 7, my 7th chord is half diminished, and then I'm back at my major 7 root chord. So, now I want to break down the progression that I was doing and talk about, okay, if I want to say what numbers were these, how would I do that? So, the first chord that I chose to do was this G major 7. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. I was starting on my 4 chord. Right? So I started on my 4 chord with the G major 7. I went to my 3 chord. And then I went to my 2 chord. So even if you just like that part of the progression, you're like, ooh, something about that sounds really nice. You can say, that's a 4, 3, 2. So even if I like this progression, but I want to change things up, I can just use that little thing, put it in my own key, do my own thing. Maybe I just want to do a triad version of it. But start off my progression, I was doing 4, 3, 2. 4, 3, 2. All right, so 4, 3, 2. After that, I went to this guy. So I went to a minor 7 chord, and this is my 6th degree. My 6th degree is always minor, right? So this is all kind of checking out. So I have 4, 3, 2. Now I'm going to my minor chord. So this is my 6. So it's 4, 3, 2, 6. Okay? Then I went up here to 7, right? Which is a half diminished chord. So still checks out with our formula. 4, 3, 2, 6. All right, 7. Now you'll notice I did something weird here. I said the 3rd chord is a minor 7 chord, but he's playing a dominant 7 chord, which wasn't in the rule book. So the number system is awesome. It's always going to be something that is a fundamental tool, but there's always going to be implications of other keys. There's going to be modal interchange, and I think the number system is a lot like learning the English language, where a lot of times you learn this set of rules and you're like, that's awesome. And it's like, awesome. Now let me show you every case that just ignores that set of rules. The more and more you kind of become familiar with this, it's just kind of like learning a language. You just have to learn all the little tips and tricks. And it still is fundamentally based around the number system. So I'm going here and here. So I'm going to a dominant 7. And the idea there is basically, if you listen to this part of the progression, it sounds like this could be my root chord, right? Like this has if I went, and I chose to end right here, that sounds minor to me, right? And that's basically because this is the relative minor. So next week we're going to be talking about minor keys. And basically all this is saying is I'm going to borrow a chord that occurs in harmonic minor and has a little bit more movement to resolve down to this guy. Like I said, don't worry too much about the nitty-gritty details. Just know that this was a cool little substitution that I preferred to use because I thought it had a little bit more motion instead of... And it's a really, really common substitution, too, that's used in a bunch of R&B classics, soul music, gospel. So it's not something that I was just, inventing or anything. It's definitely something that is kind of part of the vernacular. All right, so I went 4, 3, 2, 6, 7, 3, my special 3, back to 6. And then I I went to 5. So, just to reiterate here for my 5 chord, I'm not doing a dominant 7. I'm actually doing a sus chord. So again, this is a little bit kind of a substitution that I'm choosing to use here. It still has the fundamental function of a dominant chord in that it wants to resolve back to the 1. I just like this voicing because, you know, Stevie Wonder, again, kind of the classic sounds of the 1970s, they really chose to use this voicing a lot instead of the dominant 7, because this can sound sometimes a little more 1960s, a little more old school. And this guy just has a little bit more pop to it, because again, I'm not playing the 3rd, so I don't have that really, really harsh, you know, kind of interval that makes me want to resolve back to the 1. I actually have something that's a little more spaced out and colorful that I can sit on for a little bit. So that's why I chose to use this chord. And it still has, you'll notice, the 7, but I'm also including the 6 in it and the 4. So I'm including all these really, really colorful extensions instead of just kind of choosing something that has a little bit more push and might sound a little more old school. So let me just run through those numbers one more time, and then I want to talk about the melody that I made. So I have 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, special 3, 6. And then back down to my 5. And you'll notice I actually didn't play the 1 chord, so that was the only chord that I didn't play in that progression. Just because I wanted something that had a little bit more movement, and it's a fun challenge to sometimes write a chord in a key that never actually uses that chord. Okay, so now that we know that, I want to show you the little melody that I created over this. So let me just switch real quickly to the lead sound. Okay, cool. Awesome. So let me break down what I'm doing here. First, I'd just like to say, you know, again, this is more of a chord course than a lead course. And, you know, I just want to basically break down the scales that I'm using. So this is all kind of fundamentally around this D major position. So just to walk through the positions that I'm thinking about, I'm not doing the full major scale. I'm kind of using the D major pentatonic. It has kind of that more, you know, classic blues, kind of classic rock solo sound, as well as, you know, soul music and gospel. So it's all something that I think has a little bit more kind of color and oomph to it, and I chose to use that just kind of stylistically instead of the full major scale. So I just want to play you some of the positions that I'm thinking about here. So I'm going to play just a D major pentatonic. So I'm going to do 10, 12 on the E string, 9, 12 on the A string, 9, 12 on the D string, 9 to 11 on the G, 10, 12 on B, 10, 12 on E. And then up here, I'm going to start here with my pinky. So this is just another position of that same major pentatonic scale. I'm doing 10 here on the E string, 7, 9 on the A, 7, 9 on the D, 7, 9 on the G, 7, 10 on the B string, and then 7, 10 up here on the high E string. Okay, and then one more thing that I was using, so I was mainly using that. I was also outlining this chord chord. So I was using an arpeggio that was highlighting basically a B minor 7. And you could hear it really had this kind of impactful sound when I got to it. It said, okay, you know, he knows exactly where he is at the progression and he's outlining it. So I just want to briefly run through this arpeggio I was using. So I'm basically using that shape. So I'm going from my ring finger here on the 11th fret of the D, pinky finger here on the 12th fret of the D, up to the 11th fret on the B, 10th fret on the B string, the 9th fret on the high E, and then up to here on the 10th fret of the E. So that's my first part of the progression. So I'm basically using my first finger here on the 10th fret of the B string, and then doing a slide from 12 to 14 on E, then going 12, 10, 12, so. All right, now I'm going from 10 to 12 to 10 on the E string. So far I've, again, all just using the D major pentatonic, basically. Then, that's where I'm gonna outline this arpeggio. So to do this, I'm doing the 9th fret, or the 10th fret, sorry, of the E string, the 9th fret of the E string, 10th fret of the B, 11th fret of the G, 12th fret of the D, then I'm kind of just walking down the major scale there. So 12, 11, 9, 7. So we have major pentatonic. Then using kind of a B minor 7 arpeggio. And then I do that little lick at the end. So I'm playing the 9th fret here on the D string, 7th fret on the G string, the 9th fret here on the G string, and I'm doing this little kind of trill blues thing here. So 9 on D, 7 on G, 9 on G, up to 7 on B. That little trill, so going 9, 10, 9 on your G string, back down to 7 on G, and then back down to the 9th fret on the D string. So, and you'll notice too, that has kind of a minor blues sound, and that's again because I hear this minor chord under it, and even though this is in the key of D major, right now I'm kind of choosing to play some minor chords that are implying more of a minor sound. So I can actually kind of play something that sounds more like a minor pentatonic. Again, I'm still in the key of D major, but there are these brief moments of like, that sounds like it could actually be more of a minor progression. So, like I said, I'm really only using the major pentatonic in D, what I'd maybe consider the B minor pentatonic, which is, you know, again, the same exact note structure as D major. It obviously just sounds different with a different tonic. And then I'm using an arpeggio and a scale to basically outline my B minor 7. So in doing that, you can kind of hear how, you know, I brought together this entire chord progression, and something that already had a top melody line to it now kind of has this whole other lead line that, again, you know, when I'm creating a melody, what I'm thinking is not, all right, how can I, you know, play something that's really, really flashy or, you know, does all this stuff. I'm really saying, okay, I have a series of chords that, you know, I hear under me. How can I do something that's really, really going to outline what the harmony is telling me? Because, you know, it's the melody line is really, really going to influence the harmony. Whenever I'm playing chords, I'm always thinking, what's the melody? How can I play something that is really, really going to make the melody shine? Whether it be a singer, saxophone player, guitarist, whatever. And, you know, if I have to create a melody, whether it be a solo or, you know, I'm writing a song, I'm always thinking, okay, you know, how can I tie this in with the chords? If there's already a chord progression, how can I make it shine and how can I really show that I know where I am in the chord progression? Because even people who, they might not know any music theory at all or not know how to play an instrument, they know when something is impactful to them. And more often than not, when you're playing an amazing solo, when you're playing something that, just speaks to someone, it's because you're really, really outlining the chord changes. You're really showing, I know where I am in this song. I know how to control this song. I know how to kind of really showcase the musicians around me. And I know how to create, something that's going to be impactful because I understand the music. So just to recap before we do some questions, we're basically talking about the number system today. And the number system is a concept where if I'm in, a key of D major or any key, any major key, let me switch back to a clean sound. I can think about the intervals that are in the major scale, and then I can say, okay, for my major scale, which is going to be 7 notes, I'm going to assign each one of those a chord. I'm going to say my 1 chord is major, my 2 chord is minor, my 3 chord is minor, my 4 chord is major, my 5 chord is going to be major, my 6th chord is going to be minor, my 7th chord is going to be diminished. And in doing that, I can fundamentally understand where every single chord is going to occur in a key. Like I said, there are exceptions. This is not all-inclusive, or this is not, something that kind of grasps music in its totality in any way, shape, or form. This is kind of just a fundamental building block that we use and that, we choose to ignore when we want to have fun and write really cool music. But, so basically, that's how I'm thinking about my major key. And now, so that's just for triads. I also want to remind us that when we were doing this way, we were kind of also thinking about, okay, that's cool for triads. What if I want to make each one of these a 7th chord? What are each one of my degrees going to look like? What's my formula now? Okay, so my 1 chord is going to be major 7. My 2 chord is going to be minor 7. My 3 chord is going to be minor 7. My 4 chord is going to be major 7. My 5 chord is going to be dominant 7. My 6th chord is going to be minor 7. My 7th chord is going to be half diminished. Okay? So those are all the chords of my key. And, just to remind us, I was choosing to use some chords that were substitutions. So instead of using this chord, I used this chord the second time through because I really thought it led well to that B minor, and I wanted, this brief minor sound in the whole entire progression. So I chose to use this dominant 7, and again right here, for my 4 chord, I chose to use this sus chord because I thought it had kind of a cool sound to it, something that was a little bit more colorful and wasn't as, maybe old school as that dominant chord. So just one more time, I'd like to play this progression, and then we'll open it up for questions. Awesome. So that was the progression for us. Just once more, I'll see you in the comments. Any questions that you have, anything that you need clarified, let's talk about it. Hey everyone, William here again. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. So again, this is chord progression of the week. And, any questions, comments, or concerns, we're not going to open the video up to that point. So If there's anything that I talked about that you want me to clarify, to look at, we can definitely do that. If there's anything maybe slightly outside of the video or something that I kind of touched on, you're like, I'd kind of like him to go more into that, we can also look at that. So just like to open it up generally to any questions, comments, concerns. I'm happy to clarify, so shoot away. Okay, so here we've got one from garthfunkle. I see some charts and chord sheets that use the Roman numerals when using the number system. Do you think that is important? Awesome. Okay, cool. So, yes, it is important, but also I'd just like to say it's two ways of saying the exact same thing. So if we were to take like, a formal music theory class, they might have us do it with Roman numerals, and when I'm teaching the number system, often I will write it out with Roman numerals, but it's saying the same exact thing. It's saying, I have a 7-note diatonic scale, and I want to say that this is my 1 chord, my 2 chord, my 3 chord, my 4 chord, my 5 chord. What's kind of nice about Roman numerals is they have, you can capitalize and, uncapitalize a Roman numeral, so it's kind of easy in that regard to see if it's capitalized, it's major, and if it's not capitalized, it's minor. So that's kind of a good tool for kind of just breaking that up without having to deliberately write anything out. But colloquially, like if you're just talking to musicians, if you had to play a gig with someone, you could basically just say, oh, I'm going to do, a 1-4-5 progression, and that would suffice. So it's definitely, it's just saying the same exact thing, but it's not a necessity that you use Roman numerals. That's just kind of the formal, theoretical way of approaching it. Okay, we got another one. The progression ends with G over A, which does not have the third of G. I think you're saying this is really a D sus chord. Which one? Also, shouldn't we resolve the sus chord to a D? Okay, cool. Good question. So, the progression ends with a G over A chord, which does not have the third of a G. So, I'm considering this more of a G sus chord. Now, for one, I just want to preface this with there's a million different ways to start thinking about chords, especially once you get into what I would call like stacked chords and versions, because there's so many synonyms. But basically, the way I'm thinking about it is, yes, I'm not playing the third of G, and a lot of times we think that a sus chord has to be a sus 4. I'm actually just thinking about it as a sus chord because, kind of like it was pointed out, I'm trying to resolve back to a tonic, right? So, in playing this G sus chord, I'm kind of completely absolving of that, and I'm not really considering it a D sus chord because I have that G in the bass. So I'm really more thinking of it as kind of a G, or a G sus chord. Or sorry, an A sus chord, because it's a G over A. See, I even confused myself. As for the second part of that question, shouldn't we resolve it to a D? So yeah, that's a really great point. So naturally, when we're hearing a progression like this, when we have a 5, we want to resolve it to the 1. You can hear, so it kind of has this sound of resolution. I actually started the progression with the 4, and we get into this whole other concept where, the 5 chord is a chord that wants to resolve, right? And I can resolve it to the 1, and a lot of times, if we were to talk about like a 2-5-1 progression, which is a really common progression in jazz, soul, R&B, and any and all contemporary music, it would be 2, 5, 1. The reason I chose to go back to the 4 is because, what I think makes harmony cool is doing something that's slightly unexpected. And the 4 overall, too, there's a lot of songs where, I actually ended this song on the 4. And it still seemed like it resolved, right? So the 4 still does have this property of feeling like you're actually resolving something and going back to something. So it was maybe slightly deceptive not to go to the 1 after this, but I thought it kind of just added some cool movement and gives this progression a sense of like, always traveling. Because like I said, I play every chord in the number system except for the 1 deliberately because I want it to feel like it's kind of always moving. So that's a great question and awesome point. Can you go over the right hand technique that you're using on the progression again? Sure. So I vary it up a little bit every once in a while. I kind of want to go over the general idea that how I approach my hand technique on this. And the way I kind of think about it is, so as I talked about with a lot of these chords, it involved playing the E string, skipping the A string, and then playing the D, G, and B string. So generally, I kind of think about it with these 4 fingers, and I'm basically just assigning a finger to a different string set here. So, and it all comes from this kind of general motion that I'm doing here. So if you want to learn more of this technique, I'm basically breaking it out into kind of two littler techniques. So I have this general roll. And you notice most of these chords are 4-note chords, so it works really well with just 4 fingers. And I'm basically just starting thumb, first finger, middle finger, and then ring finger. And just kind of going sequentially in order. So you can hear it kind of arpeggiates the chords and has this almost cool kind of harp-like quality to it. And then the other thing that I'm doing is this percussive technique. So this comes a little bit from bass playing. So if you notice, I kind of have my thumb right against the string and I'm almost getting under it. So it gets kind of that like slap sound. So that's really, really indicative of, you know, a lot of the bass playing that would probably accompany chord progressions like this. And in that, I'm not thinking as much of the roll technique, I'm thinking more of like bass upper chord. So that's kind of like a piano technique where if I was playing piano, or at least, yeah, if I was doing it, because I'm not a terrific piano player, I'd be doing just the bass in the left hand and then the upper structure chord in the right hand and alternating between the two. And that's kind of my idea here. So I'm basically interchanging those two techniques. So if you wanted to practice them, you could just kind of practice them on one chord and do just a simple roll with a 4-note chord. And now I'm kind of doing an alternating of the bass. And you can hear too, the other thing that I'm doing is I really have this percussive nature where I'm slapping the guitar every time I hit it. So that also works really well when you have a reverb, because it kind of really, you know, if I'm not playing with a drummer, or even if I am playing with a drummer, I want to really indicate that I know where I am rhythmically, just like I know where I am harmonically. So both of those techniques kind of intertwined are how I'm approaching playing these chords. And, you know, I'm not really approaching it with this technique of I need to do this really, really specific function of, you know, I need to go, you know, almost like I'm reading a tab, because I think that can get confusing. I think more understanding the feel with your right hand will help with this, because often when I do it, I probably vary it up a tiny bit each time I play it, because I'm just going for that general feel, like I said, not really following a specific set of, you know, tablature, specific order of notes. Okay. Does the number system help a lot with communication with other musicians and it originate in Nashville? Okay, cool. Awesome question. So when we say, so this is also known as the Nashville numbers. So this kind of actually ties back to the first question a little bit too, which is about, you know, I see Roman numerals online. Is this the same exact thing? So yes, it is really similar, or it is the same exact thing. It's just different ways of kind of communicating it. And, you know, it wasn't, you know, we've had this Roman numeral system for hundreds and hundreds of years, so it didn't originate in Nashville, but the kind of colloquial approach to it maybe originated in Nashville. Like we do call it the Nashville numbers, and it's often called that because the session scene is so huge in Nashville. So, you know, if you want to get a record made in pretty much any style of music, Nashville's probably one of your best bets as far as American cities go. And the reason we often call it the Nashville number system is because it came from this culture where if I was a session musician, the studio would hire me and they'd go, okay, we have 4 or 5 songs that you're going to play today. And I probably wouldn't know the songs before actually walking in, but because I know this awesome number system, they'd be like, all right, this is the first song. The progression is, you know, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And then this is what the B section looks like. And in using this shorthand, I'd be like, oh, okay, I understand that. And then really easily too, they'd be like, actually, you know what? We were originally doing this song in key A major. We're going to bring it down to A flat because it's more comfortable for the singer. Same thing. I'm like, okay, it's just the number system, so I know how to kind of adjust this. So it is an amazing tool for communicating with other musicians. It's where it comes from. And, you know, in using the system, like I said, if you ever see like, oh, I'm at this big music festival and so just walked on stage, it's really, really easy to communicate with other musicians by giving the shorthand notation of saying, you know, here's this common language we all understand. I'm just playing, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I don't have to say I'm playing, you know, F major and I'm playing F sharp minor and I'm doing all this stuff. It's ambiguous, but it really just kind of gets to the fundamental of like, this is what I'm doing, do your own thing on it, but this is kind of the fundamental structure. Okay. Can you demonstrate the fills you made on chords on the progression? Totally. So this is another awesome part of kind of harmonic chord playing that I really like. So this comes from people like Jimi Hendrix, Curtis Mayfield, all those great people who are really, you know, applying this lyrical approach. So the way I'm kind of thinking about it is I'm using my pinky for most of these to do all of these little fills. So for this first one, and again, this will apply to any key. So this is a fill that I'm often doing. So what I'm doing is I have my F major chord as I was normally playing it, but I lift my pinky up. So I initially hit just the B string on the 10th fret that's coming from my bar. Then I can do a little hammer on. And again, I'm doing that little roll technique that I was talking about, but now with my pick. And if I want to, I can also throw in this higher string here and also get it from the bar from my first finger. So if I wanted to, I could. So there, I'm basically just playing the 12th fret because it's, you know, in the major scale for this key. So that's kind of what I can do for this guy. Now I can do this fill on F sharp minor, which is the same one that I was doing on E minor. So for that guy, I'm basically holding, like I said, my F sharp minor shape with my finger barred across here on the 9th fret. And then I'm just using hammer-ons and pull-offs in the pinky, so this really comes from a lot of pinky strength, and it really comes from, like I said, Jimi Hendrix. If you learn any of his classic songs like Wind Cries Mary, they all have this technique in it. So I basically play once, and then I'm getting the rest of it not from picking, but from hammering it on and pulling off. And I'm just doing that on the 12th fret, 12th fret of the B string, and then the 11th fret of the G string. So. And I can do that same exact thing. So obviously the frets changed because it's a different chord, but you can still see the relationship stays exactly the same. So yeah, those are really, really great techniques. They obviously make your rhythm playing a lot more colorful, and they, you know, allude back to a lot of the really great players that I personally love. So you can work on basically those first three, and you know, it's really similar when you're thinking about, again, using the number system is awesome because I can say, okay, this little fill is going to work for any 4 chord that I use in any progression. So I basically, if I just learn the fills that would maybe apply to each one of these different chords, then I can do any of this stuff anytime I want to, and then they are truly ad-libs. So definitely, I encourage you to play with those a little bit more. They're really, really fun. And again, I'm not following any specific notation. I'm really kind of approaching these chords as an improviser and as someone that would use the Nashville numbers. Okay, cool. So that looks like it was our last question. So we're going to wrap it up here. So thanks for making it to the end of the first video. So again, we're just going over the number system. Next week, we're going to start talking about the number system, but applying it more to minor chords, or minor keys rather. So, yeah, we'll get into that next week. We already had a brief kind of foray into that when we were talking about the 6th chord, because that will be our root when we're talking about minor chords. But for now, for this week, just keep working on your number system. See if you can play some of your favorite songs and think, okay, you know, I've always played Knocking on Heaven's Door, and I've always thought of it as G to D to A minor. What if I actually, you know, learned the numbers of it, and then how can I apply it to a different key? So again, thanks for tuning in for the whole lesson, and we'll see you next week.